Alrighty, hey everybody. Ryan, can you hear me? Chelsea, can you hear me?
Yep.
Good mic check.
Cool. Microphone check. Microphone check. 1, 2. I'd ask what this is, but I already know. Okay. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes. It looks like attendees are still kind of pouring in. And then we went live on Facebook, but I can't see who's watching or who's here. So we'll just hang out for a second. 6 o'clock. I'm watching the attendees trickle in. Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad you're here. Okay. Maybe just a couple more seconds.
Perfect. Sounds good.
It's funny, like I can't see any of the attendees, but I still have that same feeling of like intensity of attention. How like when attention focuses, you can kind of feel it a little bit. It's like, oh, like there are people here. It feels like there's presence. It's really interesting.
Thanks again for having us, Clayton. Really appreciate all the effort that's gone into making tonight's event a reality. And we're honored to sit here with all these good people and be hanging out at the Psychedelic Club Q&A. So
yeah,
thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure, man. We're really, really lucky to get to talk to you both. I know you have a ton of experience, and your work is just it's fascinating. It's been fascinating to me personally for a long time, and really looking forward to getting into these questions.
Right on.
So I think, we got 6:02. I think we can go ahead and start. So the format of this, what it's going to look like is I'm going to introduce myself and Psychedelic Club, and then I will have you both introduce yourselves and the Zendo Project, if that sounds good.
Sounds great.
Cool. So my name's Clayton. I'm president of the National Board of Psychedelic Club. We're a chapter-based 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to changing the cultural narrative around psychedelics. Oh, my computer's waking out. We believe that a personal interest in psychedelics is valid, healthy, and socially acceptable. By sharing our experiences and speaking openly, we make the active, conscious choice to become participants in the psychedelic renaissance. So founded at the University of Colorado Boulder in 2015, Psychedelic Club has since grown to 23 chapters around the country. To find out more or get involved in Psychedelic Club, you can go to psychedeliclub.com. It's Psychedelic Club with 1 C. So tonight we're really excited to have the Zendo Project, heroes of harm reduction here, Chelsea and Ryan. If you want to introduce yourselves and say a little bit about what the Zendo Project is.
Absolutely. I can go first. My name is Chelsea Rose, and I have been working on the Zendo Project since 2013. I'm the operations manager. I also manage the crisis team at my local ER here in Grass Valley, California. So I work in the field of mental health. And I just actually started full-time with Zendo on May 1st. So a new adventure in the Zendo world.
Cool, thank you. Ryan, you want to talk a little bit about who you are and what this is?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, my name is Ryan J. Beauregard. I am the Zendo Project Programs Manager. I've been working with Zendo Project as a volunteer since 2013 and been honored to be part of the MAP staff since 2017. I come to this work through my own personal experience of a psychedelic-induced psychotic break back in 2008. Went down to Peru, did a dieta and got spun out and sleep for a few days and had an amazing community bring me home safely and help me integrate from the experience. Took months. It was a really big thing. And When I found this work, I think about 5 years later, I was just overjoyed that this program existed and have just embedded myself in ever since to share this work all over the world, from Envision to Africa Burn to every place in between, learning, teaching, sharing, being inspired, and connecting community. So honored to be here tonight. Thanks for having us.
So glad that you're both here. So the way that this works is we've kind of pre-generated questions. We've petitioned some of our chapters and they've submitted questions that we're just gonna ask the panelists, Chelsea and Ryan, as the night goes on. If on the off chance that we don't get through all the questions, there'll be an opportunity for everybody here to pose questions, but we'll see how it goes because we do have a lot of them. Did y'all want to read that disclaimer in there, or was it?
Yeah, I can jump in and do that. So there's a disclaimer posted on the Facebook page and in the chat, which you guys can see. We just want you to be aware that all the information provided and questions answered are based on harm reduction principles, as well as our own personal experience and anecdotal wisdom. All the information presented is from a harm reduction perspective and is not intended to be medical or mental health advice. So we do not provide mental health or mental services as the Zendo Project. We're a peer support service that's not a substitute for those things: medical, psychological, psychiatric diagnosis, treatment, and advice. So the information being shared by us here today from the Zendo Project is for educational use only. And I just want to give you guys a little context. The Zendo Project's an organization that focuses on providing peer support for people undergoing difficult psychological or psychedelic experiences at large events and gatherings. And additionally, Zendo Project provides education and training to anywhere from health professionals to grassroots organizations who want to offer their own peer support services. So that's what we do. And we were founded in 2012 and have grown quite a bit since then, and just look forward to answering your guys' questions today and sharing a bit more about this work we've been doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. So if there's nothing else that you guys have before to just kind of plug in before, then we'll just go ahead and get started on the questions. What do you think?
Yeah, let's jump into it.
Cool. So the first one was anonymously submitted, actually. It says, what does harm reduction look like? What does harm reduction look like?
Yeah, I think that this is a really great segue into what we're going to be covering tonight. The harm reduction umbrella is a big one. Harm reduction is basically taking any unsafe activity, which in this world, like it or not, being alive and walking down the street sometimes can be a risky activity. But everything from driving a car to going to a concert, choosing to be in a relationship, all of the things that are out there, we're wanting to create, as harm reductionists, a bigger education and understanding of, given the risks that are out there, what sort of precautions are we taking? So everything from, that can look like seatbelts in driving a car, that can look like sex education and condoms when it comes to relationship, and when it comes to things like drug education, that can look like drug testing, drug information, training on how to use everything from preventative to clean needles, needle exchange sites. There's a big pie, and so within that pie, Zendo actually fits into the very narrow slice of psychedelic harm reduction. And then within that also involves Dance Safe and Drug Policy Alliance, SSDP, a lot of different organizations around supporting psychedelics or at least mitigating the risks associated with psychedelics. And for Zendo's project specifically, what that is psychedelic peer support. So our slice of the pie within psychedelic harm reduction is supporting people through difficult experiences, psychedelic or otherwise. We have found ourselves we were born at Burning Man back in 2012 after a lot of different multidisciplinary approaches were taken for harm reduction support and helping people through difficult psychedelic experiences at Burning Man and the Boom Festival in Portugal. And through that accumulation of wisdom, knowledge, and mentoring, MAPS launched its first 2012 Burning Man with Zendo Project as a little hub within a village that supported people having difficult psychedelic experiences. And we've just grown ever since. We've been doing a lot of public trainings, a lot of at-event services, and we show up to conferences, we're on panels. We're just excited about being able to bring this work to the public. And I think one of the most exciting things that we get to do here tonight is that part of what we talk about with Zendo Project, which is engaging the community in open and honest dialogue. So we are aware that in most places, with the exception of a few decriminalized cities, that psychedelics are illegal, and they are still illegal federally in the United States of America. And so given that people are still choosing to use psychedelics, regardless of what their legal status may be, how do we help give the knowledge so that the amount of unnecessary hospitalizations and unnecessary arrests due to people just not knowing how to properly deal with an intense psychedelic experience might be transformed into instead a place for personal growth and even community growth. So we'll go a little bit more into that, but I hope that at least it addresses that bigger slice of the giant umbrella, as well as our specific thing that we do within it.
Cool. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, that open dialogue, open talk is really, it really erodes some crust in the culture right now, doesn't it? When you talk about these things openly. So we've got
And I mean, just, yeah, I think that's a really, you know, I mean, I know this isn't the same way that we get to do it on in our public trainings, but maybe even just in the chat, if people could just give a yes or a thumbs up or any of that. If anybody here in this Zoom has either themselves or knows people that have had difficult psychedelic experience, just, you know, give a thumbs up or a yeah, know about that. I'm just curious if that is a reality that we are all familiar with. Yeah, it looks like a few people are definitely chiming in that it's not an unknown experience that is.
wow, everybody.
Yeah.
So we got a question from San Mateo, California, the chapter there. Thanks for sending that in, San Mateo. What they want to know is, why is the organization called Zendo Project, and what is Zendo?
Chelsea, you want me to take this one too? You want to grab it?
Yeah, go ahead. I just want to point out to everybody that the Zendo structure namesake is that structure you see there above Ryan's head in his photo. So go ahead, Ryan, you can.
Yeah. So really the name Zendo and Zendo Project came from this amazing story of this Austrian Zen teacher, Banja Palmers. I might be mispronouncing that, and I apologize if I am, but he was a teacher that was bringing a large group of European Buddhists to Burning Man. And after, you know, their experience, they were realizing there was a need for some sort of refuge or a quiet space for people who are coming to Burning Man and just otherwise overwhelmed by the intensity of it. And so they combined their efforts with a man named Paul Disco, who designed this amazing structure that is called the Zendo. And again, it's above the head. It's what we do at Burning Man. And it is basically 5,000 pounds of recycled corrugated cardboard that is brought into these different panels and assembled into this really beautiful yurt. And back in the day, it was a structure that was part of the Entheon village. And it was part of a silent meditation where one person was holding space both at an hour of sunrise and an hour of sunset. Excuse me. After a few years, this structure was donated to MAPS for the purpose of providing the same sort of meditative space holding as a psychedelic support space. So even though we're not using it strictly for meditation, we still believe that the art or the name of Zendo, the place to go and practice Zen or meditation beingness, is really appropriate to the work that we do and the space itself. We believe that with Zendo Project, sitting for someone in a difficult psychedelic space is its own form of meditation. And that really so much of this is rooted in presence. So we are honored to continue to bring this this lineage of inheriting this amazing space that I think came from quite the opposite intention of the normal go to Burning Man and party, but these Zen Buddhists that were really interested in experiencing Burning Man, but also wanting to balance it with their own flavor of what they wanted to bring there. And so it's been an honor to carry the torch forward. Chelsea, you got some other eloquence to add?
Oh, I mean, I think you covered it really well. Maybe the only thing I would add is that there's something really beautiful about a round space, and both of our Zendo spaces at Burning Man are round spaces. We've got 2 spaces there, the cardboard yurt that Ryan explained, and then a Pacific yurt as well. And there's something, really magical in creating a safe space for people to come to where presence is the key and is available for people in whatever space they're in, that they be welcome there and accepted and held in that presence. And so, yeah, I think it's really has been a gift to have that structure carry us through all these years out there.
And I'll just add that Chelsea and I have been doing the Burn Build together now since, 2013 informally, right?
Yeah.
But really that we've taken over a lot of the duties of making sure the equipment and the people and the builders are, showing up and doing the thing. And we really take a lot of pride and create and connect a lot of community. The Zendo itself, in comparison to, I would say, Chelsea, the Pacific yurt, which is a traditional yurt that goes up in about a day and a half. The Zendo it's a labor of love, 5,000 pounds of cardboard that all have to get bolted together. And I think 67 different segments of walls, 67 different segments of roofs and benches. And man, we've learned a lot over the ages. Putting the Zendo together is its own difficult psychedelic experience in sobriety, to be clear about that. We're not on drugs out there. Psychedelic is not necessarily always substance related. It can be very mindset, and being out in the middle of the desert, strapping together a bunch of cardboard can be a very surreal experience. But the rewards of creating that space and being able to invite in the public to experience it, it's a reward quite unlike anything else I think we've experienced in the festival world.
That's it's really incredible. I had no idea that it had such a rich history, the structure and the space itself. And I love what you said about the magic of a circular space. It's like there are too many 90-degree angles in the world, too many squares, right? So the next question comes from the CU Boulder chapter. Thank you for sending that in, CU Boulder. The question is, what can we do as untrained individuals to best support our peers during difficult experiences, psychedelic or otherwise?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it has many answers. But I just like to bring this back to just like the really simple piece of what it means to be a friend, or what it means to be there for somebody, right? Like, what would you want going through a difficult time, psychedelic or otherwise, right? For me, I would like to be somewhere comfortable and warm. I would like to be with somebody who I care about and who cares about me. So, I think it's interesting because oftentimes we think about these things. We think maybe more than we have to even think about them. Like, how would you be there for somebody who's upset in any moment, right? Those things it's the same thing, even with psychedelics. And so the Zendo itself operates with 4 principles, and I can just briefly touch on what those 4 principles are. And those principles are, built around harm reduction and psychedelic peer support, but they go far beyond that. We can use these in our everyday lives in many other contexts. And so I'll just touch on what those are. Our first principle is safe space. Second principle is talk through, not down. The third is difficult is not the same as bad. And our fourth one is sitting, not guiding. And so I'm just going to be really quick about each of them. But a safe space what's a safe space? A safe space is somewhere where you can be in the place that you are and be held there safely physically and safely emotionally. And safety is different for all of us, but it's a foundational human need. And so to really be able to even dig in to more difficult experiences and to really dig in and see what's there for us, being safe is a foundational piece of being able to take a deeper look at what's going on. And so, in the setting, that's, like I said, I like to be warm, or I like to have snacks, or, so it's those physical pieces, what's in the environment around me. And then also, what's my state internally? So how am I feeling? Who am I with? Those sort of things, those all impact the space itself. So when we're thinking about somebody having a difficult time, what can we do to help them feel more safe? Because that's immediately going to calm the nervous system. Talk through, not down. Talking through, not down is about, it's about being with someone in that hard space. I mean, we can, even when we're upset, say we're mad about something or upset, you can't tell somebody stop being upset, right? That doesn't work. It would be great sometimes if it did, but it doesn't. So it's just about saying, okay, well, we can't just turn it off, and we can't really talk it down. Like, that's a phrase we hear a lot, but it's really about just going through that experience, keeping them safe, encouraging people to turn inward and see what's there. One of the statements that we've used over the years is just the statement, trust, let go, be open. And that's just, just kind of arriving in that moment, and we're just going to ride this all the way through, and that's okay. And so then difficult is not the same as bad. I mean, I'm sure you guys could probably even put it in the chat how many times you've heard the statement bad trip, right? And instantly we associate that as like, oh, that was not good, but it's in those difficult places that we can really find the gifts. And it's in our most difficult challenges, right? I mean, even on a planetary level right now, we're going through something really difficult. But I know we can all think of some ways that this has showed us something maybe we needed to see, or, that we can take it and look for the meaning in it. And in that meaning, we can find growth and change. And so, it's often not really when things are smooth and sailing along that we are really, really learning a lot, but it's in those difficult places that we can learn so much. And so, so there's a gift in that. And that's the basics of difficult is not the same as bad. And then lastly, the sitting, not guiding. I love this principle. This is my favorite. And this is like what we were talking about in regard to Zendo's namesake. It's just that concept of being with somebody. We don't even have to do anything. And that's relieving for me, right? Because when I'm there in that space and I'm not sure what to do, I can actually say, I don't need to do anything. I can just be here with somebody. I can just let that person's experience be the guide that carries them through what's happening. And I can be supportive, I can be present, I can be open, I can come from that observing mind and that observing place where I'm just there and I'm just allowing what's occurring to occur, and I'm holding space. And so that, I like that one because it's, it's just so simple as to just kind of say to ourselves, like, we're such a do culture. Like, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to fix this? How are we going to change this? But in that space, you actually don't even need to do that. You can just be with what's there. And I really appreciate that. And so, those are the 4 principles that we operate from. But like I said, I use those in my life in many other places, and I find them to be beneficial in my friendships and my relationships when I have a friend going through a hard time or when I'm going through a hard time. So yeah, I mean, I don't think, I mean, of course it's helpful to have the training about how we deal with these things and to even just have these conversations, right? That's the beginning. But it's also just good to remember that the simplicity of being a friend and being there for people and caring for people, like, those are human qualities that we cultivate throughout our lives and can continue to cultivate even in these sort of experiences. And Ryan, I don't know if you have anything you want to add there.
Sure, yeah, I think you really nailed so much of it, Chelsea. I'll just piggyback to say that I think in our society, there's a thing around emotion. Like, there's not a lot of bandwidth for expression of emotion in any way, but especially in a healthy way. And so I think especially in this time we're in with COVID, there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of suffering happening in the world. And my personal take is if we can get into a supported place where we feel authentically accessible to those emotions and able to express those emotions in the safe place, that could be some of the most helpful things that we could do for our friends, our family, our community. And I think that what you're saying here, Chelsea, and this is that sitting, not guiding, is like, so often we see a thing, we're like, oh, how do I jump in and fix, like my friend is hurting, like, how do I fix them? And the reality is most of the time there's nothing to be fixed. Like emotion or having an overwhelming experience isn't a thing to be fixed. It's especially as, you know, a predominantly, or at least a programmed that comes from this unconscious male that I think we're aware now has not been very healthy for the last few hundred, if not few thousand years, which is, you know, that male paradigm of like, oh, there's a broken thing, let's fix it, rather than that more matriarchal feminine of like, you're having an experience, like, let me cradle you. You know, that reminder that I heard from one of our volunteers once of like taking care of people in psychedelic or emotional crisis is like taking care of a sick toddler. You want to do so much about it, but all you can really do is just support that person through their experience. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest shifts that we can do as a community is to get past this thing that things need to be fixed and really find ways to embody being human and compassionate again. So yeah. I think you said it well, Chels.
Yeah,
Thanks for
basic
letting me
human
piggyback
kindness.
a little on that.
Just
There you go.
yeah.
Oh man, they're really like truly beautiful principles. They're almost heretical, like blasphemous to our society, like really subversive. And that's why I love them so much. That's what's amazing about them, how subversive they are. It's unfortunate that that's the case, but it's beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so this next question, kind of more specific, maybe like an application of those principles. So the question's from the University of Massachusetts Psychedelic Club. They say, how might Zendo Project offer guidance to someone who is feeling troubled by thoughts about the universe they feel while on psychedelics? For instance, if someone is feeling fear or even confidence in the existence of a god or not, would Zendo Project confirm their worldview so they feel comfortable?
Yeah.
Ryan, do you want me to take that one, or you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll start it and then I'll pass it over to you if you're all right with that. I think,
Yeah,
you know, for those of you that maybe are just joining and didn't have this context before, I'll just say that I come to this work through my own psychotic breaks, psychedelic induced sleep deprivation, spiritual emergence. We'll get into that maybe a little bit later, the specifics of that, but and not mine with that as a concept. But I think that really is, from my experience, there's something really powerful about folks giving a real, I don't want to say a validation, but an acknowledgement of reality. And especially for the folks that we have seen who come in paranoid, there's no quicker way to get somebody more deeply ingrained in their thought that there's a conspiracy happening against them than to tell them that there's no conspiracy happening against them. And from my own personal experience from my psychotic break, there was some aspects of it that were very much like the Truman Show. And so it was like everybody was in on it. And if there was any sort of trying to point that out or people telling me that that wasn't the case, it just reinforced that that's what was actually going on. So I think there's some really interesting approaches. And I know that, Chelsea, I've heard you share some of these. And I'll just say, Sarah, who couldn't make it tonight, our director, Sarah Gale, has a really solid piece that she talks about this around in our trainings around paranoia. It's like to acknowledge where folks are at and to help give them a perspective and a reflection of like, again, I think I've heard you say it this way, Chelsea, so I'll let you take it away of like, I hear where you're at, or I hear that you're having this experience that sounds really scary versus like, no, that's not really happening.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody's saying that they are feeling connected to the experience of God, for example, as they asked in the question, I would just see where they're at with it, right? Which is what I was talking about with our 4 principles. It's okay to be where they're at and to confirm what's true for them in that moment, or to just be with them in what's true in that moment. Because, you know, we all have our own inner wisdom and our own inner guides. And so if somebody's experience is taking them through something regarding God or the universe, that is their experience. And it's not really my place to discredit it or to even make it right, so much as it is to just hold space for that that's occurring. And so, an example that I've used at times is really simple, but a lot of people can feel like they're dying when they're taking psychedelics and when they're in a difficult place. And I might not even say you're not dying. I might say something more to the effect of, that sounds really scary to be there. I'm here with you, just to let them know they're not alone. And, or I might say, I'm here with you. And from my perspective, I'm making sure you're safe. So I hear you're not feeling that way. And I hear that this is really scary. And so it's that balancing perspective of really allowing their process to unfold and let them be the guide of their own process. And while you're there, you're containing and holding so that they can go into those places and yet have that safety net. So that's, I think, how I would approach that, is like, wherever they are, it is okay. We don't even have to discredit it or make it right, either way.
Yeah, as I'm seeing pop up in the chat, empathy. Yeah, that's huge. And I think the point that you're really pointing at is we're giving them, the guest, the friend, whoever's going through that experience, the opportunity to look at whatever fertile ground that might be for their own growth, their own exploration, reflection, and to do it in our best way, to be unbiased about it, to ask questions in return, or to help explore a thing rather than be like, whoa, you feel like you're the devil? That sounds really scary. And like, I mean, it's a different thing if they're like, I feel like I'm the devil right now, and that feels really scary. It's okay to validate that, and to express that through active listening. But it's important that we leave aside our biases. If somebody's like, oh, I'm God right now and I'm controlling the whole universe, and we're just like, oh, that sounds scary. They're like, what are you talking about? This is the coolest thing I've ever done. So, really asking people what that's like, and then using that as a jumping point for what's next. Where do we take this? How can we help? I think all of these are just potentials for rediscovering an aspect of ourselves. And, I think we dive into this a little deeper in the training, but the idea I like to bring this back to is making relationship with all of our parts, right? And the psychedelics make the unconscious conscious, so that we have these parts of ourselves that we've repressed or not chosen to look at. And here the psychedelics are like, here's a gift. Look at this part of yourself. And sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, bring that closer. I haven't seen that part of myself since I was 5. And other times it's like, I don't want to look at that. That's not me. And so the idea, the more that we can see all these different aspects of the world, of ourselves, of our relationships and family, I think it helps us to give perspective of both the gratitude of what we have and the grief of what we've lost, and even better, hopefully, the inspiration of where we can take all this, where we're seeing what has worked and what hasn't, and how to play a better game.
Yeah, absolutely. So true. And I think the other thing is that we don't even need to understand what's going on. We come from our logic so much, but sometimes when something's arising for somebody, they may not understand what's going on, and it may take a lot of time before they understand it. And while we're there with them, we may not know either. And that's okay. And like Ryan said, like, there is so much fertile ground in those experiences for new things to arise and for us to understand ourselves more deeply. And it just can take time to get to that point of really knowing what's going on. But each step along the way is that exploration of finding out what's there.
Wonderful. Thank you for going so deep into that question. There's so much there. You two have so much to say, and I think we could probably spend several hours I know I could spend several hours just listening to you two. The next questions, they're kind of similar. They're both submitted anonymously. So the first one is, what do you do? There's that language again. Like, what do you do? What can I do? Maybe nothing. What do you do when you're sitting for someone and they begin freaking out and you have no experience with what they're feeling? So like and then the next one is, what are some harm reduction techniques that can be applied outside of the festival setting? So I'm thinking the thing that I'm hearing there, I don't know if you two hear this, is like the doer mind wants direct, actionable, like something's happening. Can you give us like some sort of, I don't know, somatic practice, or like, what are you doing? What are you doing? We can't get over the doing. What is being done?
Yeah, and Chelsea, I'd love to hear about this a little bit from your experience of crisis work. And I can imagine the diversity of the things that, how was that put, that they, you don't know what they're feeling right now. I imagine you've had one of the, or two of those situations, like, we've never seen this before.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was telling Ryan the other day that, I've been managing our crisis team for 2.5 years, and regularly, at least weekly, something comes in the door that we've never seen before and that we don't even really know what to do with at times, and so we're figuring it out as we go. And, I think this one, if you have somebody who's freaking out and you've never had an experience with how they're feeling, you know, in that case, I might actually reach out to somebody who's there, if there is somebody there, and say, hey, I'm not sure what to do with what's going on. Do you have any ideas? And we can figure it out together. Or, even with the person who's going through the difficult experience, if you're able to work with them and talk with them, letting them know, let's figure out what we can do. But you can, we don't always know. And again, it's just going to happen in the moment, and then we're going to be figuring it out there. And so, we can collaborate with our friends, we can work together with each other. And sometimes maybe we can't, we just feel like this is out of our hands, and we need to, we call it kick it sideways. When we're in the Zendo, we have other volunteers there, who can support, or friends. And but we're not sure if that would be the case if you were home, like as posed in the second question. But that, reaching out for support is an appropriate response when it just feels overwhelming and we're unsure what to do.
Yeah, and that piece of, being at home, I think we were having another conversation about this earlier in the week, Chelsea, of like how at home compared to, Burning Man and some of the other events that we go to, where it's like, oh, okay, sure, you've got the like medical tents over here, and like you got the hydration thing over there, but like you got your phone at home that can call 911 and take you to the hospital if you need be. You gotta usually, hopefully, some sort of plumbing or water stored away at whatever place you're calling home. And there's something to be said about applying these same principles at home, away from the festival. And sometimes they're harder to apply at the festival. But the idea that, the preparation, I think, if you can, the way that I've heard it put before is clean your room and do your homework. And the idea of that is like, take out the trash, like fix that thing that you needed to fix that like is strange, or have that conversation. If this is the intention of deeper healing here, the things that I've heard from some folks that are recommending, Jim Fadiman in the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, Stan Groff, and oh my gosh, why is that? Clay, will you jump in? Tell me what the title of that is. The
new one is the Way of the Psychonaut.
Way of the Psychonaut. Sorry, they were just such similar titles. They were both the same. So this idea of preparation is really emphasized in both of those, of like, what are you doing? And this comes to a bigger place of harm reduction of, if people are going to do psychedelic medicines, whether or not that's legal or not, take the time to read up on Arrowwood, take the time to test your substance and verify that it is what you think you're getting into. But a lot of this thing is, in addition to all the preparation that you can do, I think one of the mantras that we've seen at Zendo Project and just in psychedelic journeys in general is what I'm hearing you say, Chelsea, from Crisis, is expect the unexpected, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Which it just, in that, then you think, okay, how can I prepare for the unexpected? And sometimes it's simple things like a buddy system.
Yeah.
Or, just preparation, resourcing. If this goes south, what am I going to do? These are great things to think about beforehand. And in regards to the, if you're out, how would you apply these techniques outside the festival setting, i.e. at home? There's actually some major benefit to not being in the festival setting, right? You have a lot more control over your environment. Hopefully home is a comfy place. And you're not dealing with cars, and you're not dealing with the public, and you're not dealing with a lot of other variables that are out there when you're out at a festival or you're out on the town. But, you know, I think that piece the first thing that comes to mind for me would be, if at home, have a plan and have a buddy system. Because yeah, you can expect the unexpected. And
yeah, and I think that buddy systems are really, I mean, this is the reality that I think, at least from some of the friends and just anecdotes that I've seen with people that just wanted to get after it, there's something really important of having a buddy system. Some of the worst journeys that I've seen, and I get that, like, there is a counterculture, I got myself, I don't need any help sort of psychonaut approach that can be very popular these days. But I've heard of some horror stories where people have made some really devastating life choices that they couldn't fix. And had there been just another person there to give them a little reality check, to be like, nope, not safe, not a good idea. Like, I know you feel really passionate about this. Let's sleep on it. Let's see how you feel on the other side of this thing, I think could go so far. And I just think that idea of, you know, again, like, we call it psychedelic babysitting sometimes, and there's no disrespect in that ever meant. It's just saying that there is a younger part of ourselves that comes out that needs a little bit more resourcing sometimes. And the idea of having somebody, and even just the simple things, if you're at home or walking down the street with friends, is like, who's the person that's going to step forward and diplomatically deal with a situation that arises? You know, I say this like jokingly in the trainings, but it's like, oh my God, are the cops coming? Or is that a bunch of like hot cops? Is that a bunch of like strippers coming to like the bachelor party next door and like, we got nothing to worry about? For people in psychedelics, sometimes that's really hard to differentiate between. But if you have somebody who knows how to handle themselves in those situations, or better yet, is choosing to be the sober tether back to reality, I think that can go so much further, and allowing at the end of the night to be like, look, you're having an experience. And I'll just say this from a place of noise complaint. I've heard of some horror stories of people having a big experience and getting police called on them from noise complaints. You know what's awesome is going next door when somebody's refusing to scream, that's one of your friend, knocking on all the doors and just being like, my friend is having a really hard time. They're going through such grief in their life right now. They lost somebody. They're having a devastating time right now. Like, if we're going to try and keep it down, we're going to do our best. But in the meantime, if you could please not call the cops, we're aware of what's going on. We're going to try, if it gets too bad, we'll take them to the hospital. I want you to know that there's something to be said about making relationships and knocking on some doors and preemptively taking a situation that otherwise might escalate. And then to flip side that, as I know we are, I think, as horrible as it may be to end up in any sort of authoritarian, you know, system, it is better to make that call for your friends. And again, I think we're going to get into this a little bit more from some of the questions I think Clayton has lined up for us, but just the idea that if you're in doubt, err on the side of caution. Like, call the paramedics. If you're in a place where you have somebody who's just all of a sudden flipped out and getting violent, and none of you as good friends can talk that person down, sometimes taking that to the next level is necessary. And that's ultimately for your safety. That's at the core of harm reduction, is making sure everybody's safe.
Yeah.
So here a lot of, oh, Chelsea, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Clay. I just have one little thought to tag on after you.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that I hear in this question is that it's scary to be the friend, or it's scary to be the person there who has a friend going through a hard time, right? Because we think bad trip and we think, oh, I don't want to be the person having the bad trip. But it can be also scary for the friends that are there who see someone going through that and they don't know what to do. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, and that's why I say reach out for help, reach out for support, because it is uncomfortable to be the friend and be in that situation. And we don't always know what to do. In fact, most of the time, I don't think going into it, we were expecting it, and we've got to figure out what to do in the moment. And it's understandable that place is a little or a lot scary. Yeah. So I just wanted to say that.
And I think what just to speak to it anecdotally, what you're talking about that I think we've both seen is sometimes somebody comes into the Zendo having an experience that is this godlike experience, right? Or they're just ecstatic, or wherever they may be, they are having a great time. They're actually having the time of their lives. but their friends have never seen anything like this. And they certainly have never seen this side of their, or personality of their friend come out. And they're the ones that need the support. And so it's just to be aware that sometimes we are the ones that are needing more resource than our friends going through the experience and either feeling like they're possessed or they have no control of what's coming out of their mouth or what they're doing with themselves. That's fine. But that's, again, that's where it's really wonderful to have the diversity of more than just one person. So you're just like, I got to tag out, man. This is super triggering for me right now. I need to go in the other room, take a breather. Can you please watch this person and keep them safe?
Yeah.
Hmm. Community, having people around, having a support. Yeah, that's so important. That's not even something that I had thought about, is like, oh, having a trip sitter, because you're right, that ethos of 5 dry grams in silent darkness by yourself, that's kind of worked its way into the culture. And I think you mentioning that is really helpful. So somehow the questions page just closed on me, but we had 3 that were kind of similar. Let me get back to it. They're kind of focusing on that activity thing again. I mean, one of them was about, I'll just read it verbatim. 1 second here.
Yeah, take your time. It's okay.
Here we go. Yeah, my computer's been jumping around. It's very strange.
You're coming through clear, so that's good.
Cool. At least that part's working.
Yeah, and I'm happy to read them if you need any reference.
So it was like,
I got some I think I threw them in the chat there for you.
Yeah, I got them here. There are kind of
Mm-hmm.
3 that are there was one from Andrew, the Denver chapter. Thank you, Andrew. And then one from the University of Massachusetts that are, I think, similar enough to kind of group. So I'll just ask them, kind of string them together if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first one is, what are some activities that can help bring a person to a calmer state of mind if they don't want to talk or talking isn't helping? So maybe besides sitting, even like dancing, chanting, drumming, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one also mentions techniques. What are some techniques that have been utilized in helping someone down from the intensity of a trip, humming, dancing? So yeah, techniques, activities. Can you offer any specific kind of tools that people can use in the moment? Because that doer mind just has such a hard time with like, oh, just sit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's that I think someone mentioned that in a question as well, like that balance between allowing someone to face their difficult experience and receiving support from the outside, because we want to provide support. I mean, if somebody's really suffering, we don't want to just be like, sorry, you're over there, going through that. There's a balance in that engagement. So Ryan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. I think there's, 2 things. Just to continue to piggyback on where I think we were talking about getting community support. The idea of facing difficulty within versus without. I think this is, again, and I think I saw this in the chat briefly from the audience, was the idea of archetypal energy. And so just one of the things both around activities and ways to help support is a change of scenery. And sometimes just a change, and I mean, I say change of scenery, I'm being very meta about it. It's like a change of, what am I thinking? What's the music I'm listening to? What's the lighting? Should I just step outside for a moment and get some fresh air, or even open a window? And then the change of scenery in my body, like the difference between like sitting like this for hours or just being all crunched up in kind of a fetal position, and then just opening the arms. I think I've seen people go through big changes and just reorienting either what they were looking at or how they were positioning their body. But then the archetypes, I think, are a huge aspect, is that thing that can happen with us when we provide support or come up onto a scene in a festival of providing support, is sometimes people can look and just feel this instant resonance of like, oh my gosh, you look just like my brother, and I love my brother, and we used to trip together, and like, you're my new best friend. And they'll just like find that resonance. You're like, awesome. And then other times I've shown up on a scene, and I don't know if I trigger like that I'm this ex-boyfriend or just some other awful archetype from this person's life, but they make it like they just hate me from like the first moment I step on scene, no matter how I present myself. And so we've learned with Zendo Project, that's where community and diversity of archetypes is really helpful to give, again, a different environment. But then, the idea of making it bigger. the idea of surrendering to the experience. But I think on another level, there's such a gift in these states of emotional access. And sometimes that can look like crying or laughing or even being angry without really knowing why, and giving people a safe way to do that. I think this is where we see a lot of shift towards safety in the work that we do. Is somebody being angry isn't dangerous. Somebody being angry and want to act that anger out violently on somebody else, that's where things get dangerous. So the ability in those cases to allow the person to have the difficult experience, but then guiding it in a way that's like, please don't tear down the walls. Please don't rip apart the furniture. Please don't hit anybody else. But you know what? Here's a pillow and a bed. Beat the heck out of that bed with this pillow. Get that anger out. Feel it, and same for this idea of, making it bigger is like, you see somebody maybe doing a thing with their hands. Mirroring can be a big thing of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna do this thing with my hands. And all of a sudden we're just doing these giant windmill exercises. And all of a sudden they're just like, just exhausted. Like, I moved energy. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we see with psychedelics across the board and the people we support. People want to move energy. And I just want to speak from my own personal experience in sobriety. I have found through my upbringing of swimming and water polo, when I graduated with that, I didn't know what to do with all my energy. And I lived at the beach, and I had this story that just going to the beach and like being kind of wacky, whether that was doing cartwheels or Tai Chi, was just like, it was weird. And I've noticed, again, this is my story, but there is not a general acceptance in this society to say, go and get weird with your energy. It's okay if you're at like ecstatic dance or, 5 rhythms, and you can be like weird, or in a festival, but like, if you just go out, and I still do it, I have that judgment, I'm not proud of it. It's programming that's embedded that I'm trying to let go. But you go to a park and you see somebody moving in a weird way all by themselves without somebody kind of following those movements. You're like, wow, what drugs are they on? and so the idea again of having a safe space to have the movement sometimes can be everything. Because I notice even in my sobriety, when I just go out and move, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm feeling like I'm sending out a concentric ring of just weirdness, and I want to go shut that down. And that's on my own work. I'm not suggesting anybody needs to do that, but the idea that with all of this thing, we are giving as caretakers the space for somebody to go through that experience, emotional movement, the other. And I mean, again, art. That's a huge thing. Give somebody a box of crayons and some papers, let them go to town. And, we talk about vocal and being able to talk something through, but man, even just vocalizing sounds can be a really big one. And breathing.
Yeah, absolutely. The vocalizing sounds I've been really connecting with lately, because everybody in our neighborhood has been howling at 8 p.m. I don't know if other people have that going on in their neighborhoods.
8 o'clock neighborhood.
But there is something so freeing about howling with the whole neighborhood. Like, I'm not going to bother my neighbors to the left. They're doing it too. And, it just makes me think, in terms of like Ryan's saying, moving energy, right? You can move energy together with somebody. If you have a friend going through a difficult time, or you're going through a difficult time and you want a friend to do it with you, you can request that. Like, howl together or make noises together, or movements, like Ryan said. Like, if someone's doing some movement, if you start doing it, it's like it's permission, right? And then that movement, it's the movement of energy, can be so calming for the nervous system. And I think that's the only other thing I would really tag on to what you said, Ryan, is that there's when you're going through something intense, like, the comfort of your environment can really be soothing for the nervous system. And so what is that thing that's soothing for the nervous system when things are really intense, and is that warmth, is that hydration, is it even weight? Like, sometimes just the weight of like something heavy on my body, whether a friend lays on top of me or bury me in stuffed animals, whatever it is. Like, there are certain sensations you can work with in the nervous system. Pulling and pushing is regulating for the nervous system. So you could hold your friend's hands and both lean back, right? And pull forward and lean back. Those movements, even they do that for regulation with kids, being on a swing, and like pushing a wheelbarrow, pulling a wagon, those sort of movements, they actually regulate the nervous system in the body, which can bring more comfort to an intense experience in the physical body. So there's so many things, but and there are times where I've seen people in psychedelic states and they're locked up in a ball and they don't want to come out of that ball, and that's okay too. But sometimes you see like that moment they shift out of the ball, there's a whole shift that happens in another way, in terms of their experience when they can move past being curled up and start to open up, that there's a shift happens physically in the body. So the movement of energy, vocal, physical, whether it's breathing, drawing, expressing art in that way, and with touch, if you're with your friends, and as long as the touch is consensual, squeezing each other's hands, being held, all of those things can be really supportive when you're
I saw here, thank you, Emmanuel, sense of smell, perfume, smudge, essential oils. That's a really good one. And I just want to say from personal experience, it's one we have to be really careful with within the Zendo, and just want to be considerate with the diversity of community, because some people love the smell of, maybe it's white sage or Palo Santo or sandalwood, and other people are just like, oh my God, get me the hell away from that. Like can't run out the door fast enough. So I certainly recommend, I think across the board, lavender seems to be a pretty acceptable one, but again, some other people have their triggers around that. So it's certainly a good one to have in your toolkit.
Yeah,
and there's certainly science around what certain woods and plants do when they're burned in the air and what they do to the ions around them. We're not going to get into that, but just, there's something so, I think it's so quick to bypass and go right to the central nervous system with smell.
Yeah, I think that's just a great reminder about how it's different for each of us. What makes us feel comfortable, or what makes us feel safe. Like those things are different person to person. And so just a reminder about that as we're in those experiences, we're supporting people in those experiences.
I think those are some really, really useful tools that you just gave people. Thank you so much for that. I know I really identify with the somatic movement piece. Like I'm like, wow, if I don't wiggle like a weirdo right now, like I think I might actually go crazy. It feels like that. Like it's like I have to move. And just
absolutely. So true. And people can care so much about what they might look like, what they're doing and how it might look. So sometimes even it could be just even walking, like nobody's going to notice you're walking, but it's still movement. So yeah. And wiggling like a weirdo is awesome.
It's the best. It's so fun. Judgment is like this crust. It's like rust, like judgment.
I know. Yeah.
Like, no, get out of here. I don't want you. Okay. So we've got a question about integration. This is number 10. This is another anonymous one. So how do people reflect on really difficult experiences after the fact? Is there regret, shame, amnesia? How do you promote integration?
Yeah, I love this question. Ryan, would you mind if I just say something?
Please,
and then I'll let you take
jump.
it?
Yeah, take it.
This one really resonates with me because of my experiences both in the Zendo and in my community, where you see somebody go through a difficult experience, and in the moment they may not even know what's happening, right? They might not be there, and I've seen times where people have looped on the same 5 sentences for hours, and then they'll come out of it, and like maybe just like that they'll come out of it, and what just happened to me, and how have I been acting, and and so immediately shame can come in really push down the experience and what happened. And I think that's just such a key moment there, when you have the right support around you, for a lot of love and care to come in. It can just make such a huge difference. If someone goes through that experience and then they go off and they're alone and they're in their tent and they don't have the support, they could spend hours in an even more difficult place thinking, what have I done? What did I do? How did I act? And just feeling really ashamed. And then so many other things come up in relation to that, based on our lives and our history and our experiences. So I think there really is a key place there when someone goes through something really difficult and they come out the other side, that's a really important moment for support. And then in that place where there's regret and shame, all of those experiences, it's actually a really fertile moment for an opportunity for growth and an opportunity to actually be like, wow, I feel really ashamed of myself and my friends still love me and somebody's here and they still care, like how healing that can be. And so I just want to say that there's just that moment on the other side of a difficult experience where someone can be going through that. And it's a rich moment for possibility of having a different experience of shame and of actually feeling love and acceptance, even though you went through something like that. So I just wanted to share that bit, and Ryan, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. Really appreciate that. I think that resonates a lot with the experience that I had. And again, for those of you joining me or joining us in the last few minutes, I had my own psychotic break back in 2008, and it took months. I mean, honestly, close to 6 months to fully integrate from that. And a lot of that was because I had friends and family that were continuing to pull me through in a big way. And I don't know if I'd still be here in the same way. I mean, I don't know if I would have been locked up in a mental hospital or even just not with us, because I was not in a reality that was one that I believe I'm in now. I'll just say that it felt more like a simulation. And I think that looking back on that, there was regret, there was shame, there was even amnesia. I mean, there were times where I, looking back, don't remember some little segments of time. And I think it's not uncommon with folks that are out in big psychedelic experience or just re-experiencing trauma that gets triggered through some of these experiences. And so, I think, the question being, how do people reflect on it? There's a variety of ways, right? That we can be in disconnection, all these things. I think really the way to reframe this is what is possible? How can we do this? And I think that especially with things like the Psychedelic Club and other opportunities for people to find like-minded individuals where we can actually have a deeper community and in a way that feels safe, that maybe wasn't the same kind of mycelial reaching that has been available in the past that's currently available. I think we have an opportunity to really feel out and find our tribe. And I think it's something that Chelsea and I have experienced through 8 years of this work, is that through 8 years of doing this work day in, day out, we find the people that we're like, we really resonate with these folks. And these are the people that can really hold me and that can take these relationships through even being broken trust and repairing those trusts so that they're stronger. And I think that's a huge bit is when it comes down to it. I mean, there's a lot of talk about what integration can look like, but from my experience of working with nature mentoring with kids and rites of passage, I think the biggest piece is community. Because without that piece of saying, here's who I used to be, here's the experience I had, here's who I am now, it's hard for us to hold ourselves accountable in the same way that our friends or family or community can be like, look, I'm not here to make you right or wrong, but you said you were going to do more of this. I see you doing a lot of this over here, but I also see this one thing that you talked about not really coming to life. And it's time, like, play it big. Like, I'm here to love and support you to this next evolution that you've claimed you discovered about yourself and you want to come to, or even this fear that you discovered of yourself. I'm here to allow that fear to become something more beautiful. And back to that point that we were making earlier about making relationship, we talk about in men's work, this idea of making relationship with your shadow, that your gifts and your shadow are two sides of the same coin. And once we can really understand this thing that we're afraid of or ashamed of and see that it's not a monster, but a actual, like, a warrior within us wanting service. And as soon as we give that warrior, that disowned warrior, maybe a new purpose and service, it's no longer a demon, but it is our angel, our guardian fighting alongside us to bring our purpose and our deeper fulfillment into existence. And again, I mean, it's a lot, but like, yeah, and I'll say with that, in my own experience, what was really helpful for me was journaling and art, because there were some things that no matter how many times I said to people, they just looked at me like I was crazy, and I don't blame them because I was talking like I was crazy. But to be able to write some of that stuff down and then revisit it 6 months or 6 years down the road and really understand what it meant, or to create art that was more expressive than anything I could put into words, really helped me integrate. And I've seen that that's, I don't know, Charles, like, I don't know if you remember the story, but one of my favorites was people coming in, I think multiple times, of coming down off an LSD trip about like 7 or 8 in the morning, not being able to sleep, and just being like, can you guys help me? And watching a few of our very artistic sitters and volunteers just be like, hey, can we draw? And all of a sudden they sit down and they're drawing together for 30 minutes. And then you look over 2 minutes later and they're asleep, you know, and that I've seen the opposite of that. People come in at 7 or 8 and they're just like, I just need your help, but I don't want to talk and I don't want to do anything. And they're just staring at the ceiling for like another 3 hours. And I think there's something really powerful about, in the same way we were talking about expressing and releasing energy through movement, breath, I think there's something really powerful about that integration piece of art.
Yeah, and it's and you know, there's ways that we can do that with ourselves, like Ryan said, with journaling and art, and you know, self-care is another great support with integration. What can you do to take care of yourself? And maybe that means being with friends, and maybe that means being alone. You know, it depends on who you are and where you're at. But I think the key piece is just finding that support for yourself. So if that support is individual, you know, and you know what those things are for yourself, that's great. And if that support is a trusted friend or a therapist, that's also fabulous.
Support and community being really,
Mhm.
really important. Yeah, that's something that I've been really grateful for in my life also. I don't know, you know, you have an experience and then you come back and maybe you live in like rural Iowa or something like that. And I know that the work that I've been able to do with like men's groups or integration circles, those sorts of, that's been really crucial for me. And that's kind of the intention of Psychedelic Club for people that don't have that immediately available. You can throw up a flag and be like, hey, this is us and this is what we're interested in, and you can come join us. And that's been a really good way for people to find some of that support, because right, I don't see this going anywhere without community. It's about being together. It's about being interlinked, interwoven. So thank you for
Absolutely.
highlighting that.
Yeah, and thank you for providing that for people who don't maybe have access to that right where they are. I think it's so key and so important for our well-being.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a collective thing. Like the health of any of us individually is so linked to the
Mhm.
collective health. Um,
Absolutely.
let's see. So the next two questions are pretty similar. Also, I think I see like a couple of themes emerging in people's curiosity, like edges of the curiosity. It's interesting. Um, so the first one is from Denver, the Denver chapter. Has there been a time when you turned an individual over to medical staff despite there being no physical red flags? Where the psychological torment was beyond your ability to help, and sedation was in fact the best route.
Mhm.
And then the second question is kind of related. It's, how do you determine if someone needs more professional attention?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are really important and really practical questions when we're looking at this topic around harm reduction. So I can jump in, and you know, I would just start out by saying, like, a first responder would recommend that when there's any question of whether somebody needs medical care or psychiatric care, which happens through the medical system, that they seek medical help, right? Just if there's a question and a worry about it, then play it safe and seek the medical help. You know, however, you know, we don't necessarily want to transfer someone to medical help at the first sign of psychological distress. So we want to get a chance to see what's going on with somebody if there's no urgent physical signs. And, you know, and that said, there are times when someone doesn't have physical symptoms of needing medical care, but they may feel safer going to medical care, you know, and that would be an appropriate call for help with medical care, as if someone just would feel safer, or perhaps someone is in such an acute state of distress, whether that's anxiety or grief, that a higher level of care might also be appropriate in that context. So, you know, you're both looking at the physical presentation, right? And for that, we're going to refer to the medical profession, and psychiatric, we're going to refer to the psychiatric profession or the medical profession. And just if that's what somebody wants, right, we're going to listen to their needs and their requests as well. So obviously the Zendo doesn't provide sedation or medication. And so if somebody is wanting that, that would be something where we would move them to a higher level of care, and they would work that out within the higher level of care. So I don't know if you have anything you wanted to tag on to that, Ryan.
No, that feels really complete, Chelsea. I think you
Okay.
nailed it. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah. I mean, just, you know, if I would just always say err on the side of caution when it comes to worries about medical and you know, take care of your friends in that way. Just get professional consultation when in doubt, and you know, and seek the appropriate help if you're unsure.
And I guess what I will tag on, just in terms of mental health, one of the things that has been really useful for us, because we're often dealing with strangers. Hopefully a lot of you folks that are, you know, supporting your community, these are folks that you know in some way or another, they're friends, but baseline is huge. What's this person's baseline? And I think one of the stories that I often come back to is when the director, Sarah Gale, and I were taking care of an individual for over 12 hours. And we were really worried about their state because they'd been very clear that they took LSD and they weren't coming anywhere close to down after, you know, I think we saw them after hour 8. So, you know, the 12 hours in our care was well beyond the scope of LSD. And when we finally found their friends told us that this person was high functioning autistic. And though, yeah, there was just such a relief to know that this was the baseline, that what we were dealing with this person and the things that didn't look normal to us was this person's baseline, and this was their normal. And that helped us kind of de-escalate an otherwise potential psychiatric situation by just knowing what a baseline is. On the other hand, it's nice to know if somebody and their friends can tell you, yeah, this is this person's 3rd or 4th psychotic break, that there might be a history behind there that you wouldn't otherwise know that might be reason to escalate that sooner, especially if you found out that this person maybe has that combined with suicidal ideation or violent tendencies or something else that might warrant a higher scope of service than we're able to provide directly at Zendo.
Wonderful. Thanks for making that clear for us. Yeah, I think that's an important thing. So the next question is actually mine. And I'm really curious about it. I'm excited to hear what you have to say, because this is something that's been present in my life and present in the lives of family members. And my question is kind of about how do you distinguish spiritual emergency from first episode psychosis? And is there, like, what's the differential diagnostic criteria? It's something that Groff wrote a whole book about, but even in the book, you know, look at that. So in that book, he basically says, like, it's clinical judgment. He gives a couple like specific things. But he's like, oh, it's clinical judgment, and clinical judgment's been empirically proven to not be very effective at all. So it's sort of like, you know, there have been times in my life where I've been sitting across from a mental health professional, and I knew that if I told them what was going on in my head, I would have received a diagnosis, and I would have, like, I just had awareness that I could play the game, but it was like, I can't tell you, like, I really can't be honest with you because you don't understand. So how do you differentiate between first individually in yourself and then maybe in others?
Well, you know, and as we dive into this, I just think this is a really good segue. I saw this kind of hanging from Julia in the chat here about seeing other realities and how do you help people integrate and cope with seeing behind the curtains, or, you know, beyond the veil. And I think we can use that as kind of a segue in here. And I'll just say from my personal experience, it's like anything else. Like, once you've woken up, it's hard to go back to sleep. And I think one of the best metaphors for this is just international travel. For anybody who's never been out of the country and then goes out of the country and sees a different culture and then comes back, like, you can't unseen that. You can't see how other people live in different parts of the world and realize that what we knew as just our one reality is not the only reality. So I think there's something about being able to contextualize it. And I think that's a really interesting way to launch into this idea of spiritual emergence and psychotic break. And Chelsea, I just love to hear your perspective on this. And maybe with that book out, you even have something that you wanted to cite from it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by this topic as well, Clay, and I feel like it's a rabbit hole I could go down for a long time, in terms of, you know, both working in the mental health system that's in place in our society, as well as being connected to this work with psychedelics. And so it's sometimes like this, there are two very different worlds in certain ways, and the systems that are in place don't always address, you know, that underlying meaning that might be happening for somebody who's going through difficult psychological experience. So, you know, and I mean, just in terms of in terms of psychedelics and a psychotic break, even those experiences can look very similar, right? We may not know for some time if somebody took LSD or they're having a first psychotic break. Sometimes it's just a matter of time because they can look so similar. So that's fascinating in and of itself. But, for me, with the work that I do, both at the crisis center at our local ER and the work that I've done with Zendo over the years, I would say that that's a very hard question to answer. And that's probably why in some ways Stan's kind of pointing towards some things and there's not a really clear delineation between the two because you can't always tell, and often I think for me, hearing about it from people who've been through those sort of experiences, it's afterward that there's an ability to look back and say, okay, that was a spiritual emergence that became a spiritual emergency, and may not be an ongoing psychiatric condition. So that's just a little bit about, the challenge of the question. And it's such a fabulous question because of that. It's and then if you go into the mental health system, right, and you're having a spiritual emergency, there's no framework for that in the system. There's no framework for a spiritual experience that looks like a psychotic episode. So like you're saying, you maybe want to tell somebody that because that would lead to a diagnosis, and even in the work we diagnose, we preliminary diagnose people before we move forward with treatment. And so there's no context in place for that. We can bring it as people. So often I even say working at the crisis team, like, here's a system that's in place for somebody having a psychotic break. And it's not a perfect system. In fact, it's far from a perfect system. And it can be a unforgiving and painful system to have to go through. And so what can you do for someone going through that system? And for me, I think the best thing I could do for someone is to give them my presence. So I can just be there with them in that place, like I was talking about earlier, but in just conveying through my being, I see where you're at. I see what you're going through, and just in my being convey that to them. Like, they may go through a system that doesn't treat them the way they should be treated, but one person in that system who gives them that kindness and that respect, regardless of what they're going through, or regardless of whether it's understandable or it makes sense, that can be healing, and so it's unfortunate that there isn't more in place for people going through those sort of experiences. And what I would say is that ideally someone who is going through an experience, who feels connected to the meaning, a spiritual meaning connected to what's happening to them through it presents as a psychotic episode or psychotic break, would be to hopefully be able to find professionals out there who can both address the clinical aspect of what's happening as well as the spiritual aspect of what's happening, and that can be difficult to locate, and professional help can be really incredible when you can find the professional help you're needing. So I feel like I could keep going with this topic for quite a while. But I don't know if you have any additional questions, or Ryan, if you want to pipe in, or Clay.
I saw from Juan, there was a question in there about time frame. And so another one was the directors for referrals available for large networks and development. If somebody could just post in the integration list from MAPS, as well as psychedelic.integration as a referral system for therapists who are psychedelic minded. I think that's another big piece of this, as Chelsea and I have seen in our extended friends and family reaching out for help, is it helps to have somebody who understands understand a little bit of the psychedelic world. Because as you're mentioning, Clayton, of wanting to censor yourself from maybe a therapist or somebody else providing diagnosis that doesn't have the bigger context of understanding, when you're talking about maybe multidimensionality or being God, that it's a temporary, glimpse in that psychedelic realm that is not a permanent thing. But without that context, that could be alarming to some individuals in the mental health system. And the other piece I just want to say around time frame that I think we've seen a lot of, Chelsea and I directly, and just our team, is how effective sleep can be. for folks that have gone, especially in the festival world, days without sleeping, nights back to back of smoking DMT and doing LSD, and just not having the right, physiological resources to reset, that sometimes the people in our care, once they have had a good night's sleep or even a 3-hour REM, immersion reset, they're maybe not right back to baseline, but they're seemingly a lot more themselves. And I'd say, to piggyback on that, the other aspect to be aware of is there are psychedelics out there that are 24 to 30-hour journeys. So the DOX family, the DOA, DOB, DOCs, those can be sometimes sold as or taken as LSD, which are typically 8 to 12-hour journeys, and somebody's gone for over a day. It's just really helpful to know that, if you have the ability to test that substance and find out what it is, that can be very telling as well.
Yeah. And I think I think that's true. It's helpful to know, if we can know what's going on with somebody in terms of the length of the time that a substance takes effect. But I think, either way, spiritual emergency, psychotic break, difficult to trip, but especially with a psychotic break or spiritual emergency that's going on for several days, is at the end of the day, it is a crisis, right? It's something that needs support and needs professional help. And, ideally you can advocate for the professional help that you feel suits what you're going through. And, from my perspective, very much what we deserve from that place is that sort of respect and care that supports and meets us in our belief systems. And it can be hard to find, I would love to read. Can I just read like a quick paragraph out of this?
Please. Yeah, we only have about like 9 minutes left until 7:30, and that's an hour and a half. So yeah, maybe a paragraph and then one more question.
Yeah. That sounds great. So this is from Stan Graf's book, Spiritual Emergency. Stan Graf's a pioneer of psychedelic therapies, and after psychedelics were made illegal, he developed what's called holotropic breathwork, which is an ability to access altered states through breathing. And it's also a lot of what the Zendo philosophy is based on. So just a quick paragraph. The Chinese pictogram for crisis, which is what we're talking about, right, in this particular case, perfectly represents the idea of spiritual emergency. It is composed of two basic signs or radicals. One of them means danger, and the other means opportunity. Thus, while passage through this kind of condition is often difficult and frightening, these states have tremendous evolutionary and healing potential. If properly understood and treated as difficult stages in a natural developmental process, spiritual emergencies can result in spontaneous healing of various emotional and psychosomatic disorders, favorable personality changes, solutions to important problems in life, and evolution towards what some call higher consciousness. So that's just a little reminder in terms of how an experience can be difficult, but also a huge opportunity for self-exploration and growth. So thanks for that question.
Graf really is a treasure. Yeah, this is one of the most fascinating intersections of information that I think exists on the planet. It's highly subjective for me, but I mean, there's literally no other field, like no other intersection, no other question on the whole planet that I'm more interested in. So thank you for touching on it and being in this field and working on it and thinking about it too. Just knowing that there are people like you that are actively thinking about it, like, helps a lot.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think this is probably going to be our last question. And it says, can you talk a little bit about intentionally shaping our language around psychedelics, both when speaking to someone having a difficult experience and when speaking to more conservatively minded people? So intentional culture changing psychedelic language, both in the experience and out of the experience. What does that look like?
It's interesting. I got to watch our colleague and friend Ismail and Natalie speak on a webinar about decriminalization and this and that. One of the things that they spoke about that I really loved was the idea that stigmatizing something is actually a form of discrimination. And I think it really opened my brain up to, I think, a thing that I've done in my life of drug elitism, that like psychedelics are awesome, but like other people doing other drugs like heroin or meth, it's like, it's not as cool, it's not as like conscious or whatever, you know. I have to admit that I've made those missteps in my life. And I think the best thing that we can do around helping to involve an intelligent mainstream conversation is look at both the successes and the failures of this movement over the course of the last 100 years. From the beginnings of an adoption of, you know, indigenous wisdom, which I believe on some level we are all connected to this earth and have those roots. And so I think that there is a availability of this medicine when done right, but there's obviously the missteps that we have taken of cultural appropriation and taking the medicine out of the ceremony. That's how I've heard a lot of people that refer to the potency of whether it's ayahuasca or peyote ceremonies, is that a lot of it is the person leading it, the work that they have done, and the way that their relationship with the multidimensional or the entities of that medicine help become a healing vessel for everybody present, as opposed to, you know, what I think a lot of us, or at least I was introduced to at a young age, which is do psychedelics and go to a concert. You know, it's all fun. It's all fun and games. And so I think one of the best things that we can do is remind ourselves that on some level, we are all representatives of this movement, that we can bring this movement forward with the right amount of diplomacy and stepping back from our own righteousness, as well as our even personal voice. I found that I've gotten so much further, rather than telling people about my story and my beliefs, to present a series of beliefs from some other guy and asking somebody what they feel about them. Because I think in this, there's a huge piece around inclusion and just the nature of psychedelics being so counterculture on some level, as well as people hearing, like, whether it's the DARE program or actual anecdotes of how scary psychedelics can be, that can be very intimidating for a lot of folks. And it is not necessarily the aim of our current society. Well, let me rephrase this. The past aim of our society has not been so collaborative and cooperative. I personally think that we are taking some amazing turns, and we're seeing this in COVID, of just what it might look like to step in a different way with one another. And I think that at the core, that's what we're seeing, is that with the right language, it's not about doing psychedelics, it's about what psychedelics are pointing towards. And I believe that that's stewardship for our community, for our planet, and first and foremost, stewardship for ourselves, for our own heart, our own body, our own minds. And so I think just the idea of being able to speak about our own difficulty and difficult experiences within the context of realizing that could be very triggering for somebody who doesn't have a better relationship with psychedelics. And that I think there is a sort of martyrdom or like masochistic bragging that goes on with psychedelics, of like, oh, I got a worse story than you. Check out the time that or my friend did, whatever. And I think they can be really funny or scary or whatever, but I think that we need to temper those things with some reality of both the research, the reality of people that maybe shouldn't be doing psychedelics just because of their mindset or the actual physical setting that they're in, that they should wait for a safer place or have more professional guidance through therapy before they get there. But again, I think open and honest dialogue is a huge way to do this. Chels?
I think you hit the nail on the head.
Well, you know, and I just want to hit this other one because this seems so important. I saw this in the chat. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the person, but it was asking, and Chelsea, I'd love to hear this if we can summarize this in a minute. The favorite set that you've seen while you were at a festival, not necessarily doing Zendo work, but showing up. Was that Christopher? Mine has been the Fungineers. If you guys don't know who the Fungineers are, check them out. Every Thursday they do a live broadcast. It's like the Muppets got eaten by a bunch of psychedelic circus folk. and they are just impromptu and silly. And I just think they made me laugh and brought more of a smile to my face at Lightning in a Bottle years after years in a row of they're just quirky, funny, irreverent humor than any other DJ that I've ever seen. So if you haven't seen Fungineers, check it out. How about you, Chelsea? What's your favorite set that you've seen?
Sunrise is my favorite.
Yeah.
Always.
Daft
There's
Punk
something
at the
about
trash fence.
Anything at the first light of day, it's like the redemption moment, you know, after the dark of the night. And I just love sunrise, and good music at sunrise is and being with my friends.
Yeah.
All of those things in combination are definitely my happy place.
All right. Well, then I got to plug this other one really quick. It was an Ayla Nero sunrise set after a long, beautiful night of riding around the playa, and she was singing about the sunrise as tears were streaming down my face. And those are my sweetest. And I know we had another one, Chelsea. So just there's something so sweet about looking over and seeing your family. You know, your child just sitting there, just
Ayla, someone asked in the chat, Ayla Nero. And, you know, another musician that has been riding me through COVID that just brings like the warmest feeling in my heart is Random Rab.
Yeah.
I've listened to him for years, but it's only during COVID that like it really touches me in a new way. So that's also another set that's just been great for me in this time.
Awesome.
Amazing. So it's actually 7:30. There was maybe like one more little thing that I was wondering if we could touch on. If you have time, one more little extra thing.
Let's get after it.
Cool.
Yeah,
just because it feels important. Somebody in the chat was asking about what they can do with mental illness. If somebody has mental illness and they're maybe prone to destabilization, we talk about psychedelics like they're these amazing things, but some people are obstructed by barriers of diagnoses and things. It's like they're kept out of the party by something, you know?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. It's a really
people?
important topic. I'm happy to just give a quick answer to that one. It's not necessarily a quick answer, but we'll make it as quick as possible. Yeah, I mean, it is recommended. Often it's recommended that people with mental illnesses do not take psychedelics because of their destabilizing nature, because they can be destabilizing. And I think like the person said in the chat, that could possibly lead to, you know, a psychotic experience of some kind. And so, you know, but that said, even with those additional risks, it's something people choose to do. And so I think it's an important conversation, because if people are going to choose to do that, even though they might have those additional risks, what can they do? You know, and really it's taking the harm reduction principles to another level. You know, just really, really looking at what can I do to really reduce the harm. So even kind of growing a lot of the things that we've talked about throughout this call, whether that's really good planning. Okay, I know I'm going to do this thing. And because I know I have this particular issue that could lead to more destabilization, what is my plan? Who's going to help me? You know, where am I going to turn if things don't go well? What's my plan going to be if they don't go well? And what are the things I can put in place to prevent things from going south? Are there things that I can do? And that's going to be so individual, right? Depending on what someone's certain experience is, what their diagnosis is, those sort of things. So, you know, the quick answer would be to really make a plan, really have a plan, have a backup plan, have support, have as many of these harm reduction tactics, techniques in place as possible. I think that would be supportive of mitigating some of the additional risks. And then, you know, in terms of what they're doing, you know, like I think it's really important to look at what they're choosing to do, right? And then what are the physical impacts of that thing they're choosing to do? Because certain things will have an impact on, say, sleep. You don't sleep for 2 days. What's that going to do to you? Or maybe you're not eating, and maybe eating is a really important aspect of what you're, you know, continuing to have a good physical body regulation? Is that going to prevent you from eating? You know, just asking yourself those sort of questions, because it is different substance to substance what the impact is on the physical body. And if the physical body is sensitive to things like lack of sleep, then that's something you're going to want to think about. So I think it's just thinking through in a really thorough way, making a plan, and just knowing that there are additional risks, and being prepared to deal with those as best as possible.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So maybe not
Yeah.
even,
Nice, Chelsea.
not even necessarily not doing it, just having a plan and just having, yeah. Ryan, did you have anything else you wanted to?
I think Chelsea really summarized it. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think you're pointing at that I'll just share from anecdotal experience that I heard, Chelsea, was somebody who I think considered themselves bipolar to say that the big turning point in their relationship with psychedelics was turning from LSD to mushrooms, because they could just sleep at the end of it. To them, their really difficult experiences came after sleep deprivation, after LSD, and just not really being able to find a way to sleep. I think there's,
and that's what I mean. It's like those physical effects, right? And then you have to think about medications too. People need to be aware of their medications and what they interact with or don't interact with. So that's also important. You know, it's the information is really important in situations like that, to really make sure that you're safe, you know, based on all those variables.
I saw a request just in the chat right now for, you know, a national hotline. I'm going to double check, but I believe if you go to zendoproject.org and click on disclaimer, there is a series of crisis hotlines and resources. So zendoproject.org, take it all the way down to the navy blue footer at the bottom, and you'll see a thing that says privacy policy, and right next to that says disclaimer. So you'll see a few different crisis hotlines and resources that you can go, and obviously Google. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and you know, there are a lot of people out there who do provide assistance and you know, are there to help, peer support, psychedelic or otherwise.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There was one idea that I wanted to share that got brought up for me while you were talking about the war on drugs and psychedelic exceptionalism. The idea that because we do psychedelics, we're somehow better than other people. Our lack of access to psychedelics is a symptom of a larger disease called the war on drugs, right? And it's the sexiest symptom. It's the symptom with the most attention. It's a symptom that we're all here for because we care about, because we want to see a more psychedelic world. But it's not the most lethal.
Yeah.
The most lethal symptom of the disease of the war on drugs is manifested in the opioid epidemic. You know, last year, more people died from opioid overdose than in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam combined in a year. It's nuts. It's actually crazy.
Wow.
And so I just like to use the opportunity, because we have all this attention focused on psychedelics, to remind and be like, hey, there's a disease that everything we care about is only a symptom of. And to fail to recognize sufferers of this disease, to fail to recognize people dying in the opioid epidemic or other drugs, is to fail to recognize people suffering from the same disease as us. That it's about more than that, that our lack of access is just a symptom. There's something larger going on here. And it's the war on drugs. The war on drugs is why these conversations are interesting, why it's so subversive, and why your work is so amazing, because we live in a culture where it's not allowed, where people don't talk about psychedelics as anything but drugs of abuse. And so I'm really grateful for both of you, really grateful for your work in the world and who you are and sharing with us today. Thank you so much for showing up and sharing your wisdom and your attention.
Thanks for having
thank
us.
you for hosting us. Such a pleasure to be here and talk about these things that really land deeply in all of our hearts, and hopefully can help step by step, little by little, make our world a better place.
And,
I hope so.
And that tagline, you know, the Zendo tagline, co-creating communities of compassionate care. Like, I think that is the end goal of the psychedelic movement, is no one is left behind. Whether you're doing psychedelics or not, this bigger war on drugs isn't just about like this one thing, you know. I mean, it's about like, what's our relationship with the environment? What's our relationship with people that are less fortunate or don't have the same privilege? And how do we create more equanimity on this planet? How do we help to heal this collective trauma that we have inherited. And I think that it's something that we're waking up within all parts of ourselves and our relationships, and we're wanting to heal, and we're wanting to create and pass on a better world to future generations. And I think it requires that stewardship. And it's really I think the common ground that I see across the people that are really doing the work with psychedelics, not just doing it or saying like, I smoked this much, I did this much hell, but like, I integrated it and I see I want to be a better human, is that it's all pointing towards some version of stewarding the planet, the community, this conversation, healing. And I'm just honored to be some part of it, doing my own version of what I think is important. I encourage all of you who've shown up tonight to bring your version. You know, I think that's the other beautiful thing we have here is diversity. And we all want our individual expression of our diverse nature here to be celebrated. So I ask you to celebrate yourself and find that thing inside your heart that makes you show up with a little bit more joy and a little bit more fulfillment on this planet. I love having you here.
It almost feels like that celebration is the mechanism by which things change. Like each of us has that power to do that. And that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is what a gift to be here with both of you.
Yeah.
Chelsea,
Thank you.
do you have any final thoughts? Anything you wanted to add or say?
You know, I mean, I'm just so excited to be able to gather with a group of people and talk about these things that I feel like are so important. And, you know, that cross section that you brought up between, you know, like mental health and the world at large and what's going on in the universe and even COVID and, you know, and psychedelics and how all these topics and these conversations are touching those things and you know, hopefully opening minds and changing the impact and having a good impact out there in the world, because there's so many lessons that come through psychedelic experiences and that change people's lives for the better, even through difficult times. And, you know, I even did a talk a few weeks ago on how to use the Zendo principles through COVID out there in the world and with ourselves and in our homes. And so, you know, I just think it's so amazing because this information is so applicable. It's not just applicable right here, you know, it's applicable in so many places in our lives. And hopefully that, you know, can go out and continue to plant seeds of change in the world.
Really beautiful. Thank you so much, both of you. Really huge gratitude for both of you doing this. Really appreciate it. If anybody else has any questions or wants to know more, you can go to zendoproject.org, right? Zendoproject.org, yes, or psychedeliclub.com with one C. Otherwise, it's been really, psychedeliclub.com. Otherwise, it's been really, really good being here with all of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everybody for showing up.
Thank you so much, Clay. Such
Goodbye.
a pleasure. Clay, someone just asked if a recording will be available. It's going to live on the Facebook page?
Yeah, I think I was just about to hit the end meeting for all, so I'm glad I got it'll be, so it's live right now. I have a recording file. I can make it available if that's okay with both of you.
Yeah, I think when you record something on Facebook, I think it automatically posts. Maybe I'm wrong, but if not, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds plausible. If not, you can email me at Clayton, CLAYTON at psychedeliclub.com. Psychedelic Club.
Thanks again.
Clayton at psychedeliclub.com.
Yep. CLAYTON at psychedeliclub.com. And I'll make sure to get you the video if it's not on Facebook, but I think it probably is.
Okay. Wonderful. Sounds great.
Alrighty. I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.